Okay, so here we go. Everybody ready? Now, do I forward this or Shira? You're going to do it. Okay. Okay, good morning, everyone. So the long-awaited Zoom event is starting to happen now. And this is the history of the Sephardic Jews in Amsterdam. A fascinating story how the Sephardim of Amsterdam, the Netherlands, have contributed in a major way to the prosperity and cultural enhancement of this Dutch city during the so-called Golden Age. Go ahead, sir. Okay, the Golden Age runs from about 1630 to 1670. The Golden Age of the Dutch Republic consisting of 7 provinces, with the most important ones Northern Holland, the city of Amsterdam, and Southern Holland, the city of The Hague, where the government was and still is. So people ask me all the time, Maartin, what's the difference between Holland and the Netherlands? So Holland is not really a country. There were 2 provinces, as I just mentioned. Those were the most important ones at that time. The Netherlands is the Royal Kingdom of the Netherlands that was established in 1815 after the Battle of Waterloo, where Napoleon finally lost and got beaten, and we were allowed to introduce, which was then a Prince of Orange, and he became King Willem I of the Netherlands. So the Kingdom of the Netherlands has been around since 1815, and as of today, we still have a king. So in one of the most astonishing upsurges of commercial vitality in all history, they had become the greatest trading nation in the world, meaning the Dutch Republic, leading shipbuilders and map makers. Even Sarphati the Great from Russia sent people to the Dutch Republic to study how the Dutch built ships. Amsterdam, the busiest port in Europe, became the richest city in the world, and with their vast wealth, the Dutch became Europe's prime money lenders. Here we go. We're going to talk a little bit about Dutch art. So here's one of the guys, Albert Cuyp, very famous, did a lot of landscape painting. This is the river, the Maas, the city of Dordrecht, which is about southeast of the big city, port city of Rotterdam. So this painting is from 1650. And when we're talking about the master of the arts, of course, the #1 guy who we have to mention is on the right-hand side, Rembrandt van Rijn. This on the right-hand side is considered his best self-portrait. He made many of them, but this is considered his best. To the left, of course, you see the famous painting van Vermeer, the milkmaid. It was also at that time that several Dutch authors came to the foreground, and one of them became very famous internationally. His name is Grootjes in Dutch, which was Latinized for Hugo de Groot. That was really his name. And he wrote the famous book, Mare Liberum, which means the sea is free. So this was the first major work to state that the open seas belong to all of us, and not some countries had claimed, no, this part of the sea belongs to us. So this was a very good work. Okay, next. Philosophers. We have to talk about the famous philosophers. In the liberal atmosphere of the 17th century Holland, the French philosopher René Descartes found refuge and freedom to publish in Amsterdam. The house is still there where he lived. John Locke, from whom Adams, Jefferson, and other American patriots drew inspiration, had published some of his earliest work while a political refugee in Amsterdam. You see his picture on the bottom right. Okay. So now we're going to talk about the Jews in Amsterdam. During this explosion of cultural and intellectual changes, the Jews in Amsterdam played an important role in the prosperity of the city. And here's how it started. Now, we're going to talk only about the Sephardic Jews. of course, there was a large population, actually a larger population of Ashkenazi Jews. And of course, they made contributions to the city too. But today, we're just going to talk about the Sephardim. So in 1597, Emmanuel Rodriguez Vega, he was the first Jew to receive citizen rights in Amsterdam, because only the Dutch Reformed religion was allowed, and he was informed that organized religion was out of the question. In other words, they could not build their own synagogues yet. The first Sephardic Jews were mostly Marranos, so they were, or conversos, so they had to convert in Spain or Portugal to Catholicism. It was very hard to organize the community because there were very few morals. That is for the Dutch people online, so that is in the religieus besnijden, and the shachats, so that is the slachteren, the kosher slachteren. Okay. Okay, I think you went one too fast. Go back one. Okay. Yes. All right, that's the next one. Okay. So in 1602, two small synagogues had been established, led by Rabbi Joseph Pardo, and the other by the famous, this is Sammy's friend, Rabbi Menasseh ben Israel. Menasseh ben Israel was born in Madeira in 1604 from Marrano parents. In 1623, he married Raquel Aberbanel from a famous Spanish Jewish family who claimed to be related to King David. Menasseh founded the world-famous Amsterdam Hebrew Printing Company in 1642. He was the first rabbi that received the first Dutch royal, which was Prince Frederick Hendrik of Orange. And you see him on the right there, an etching from Rembrandt from 1636. Then another Jew came to Amsterdam, Uri Halevi. He came from Emden, which is now in Germany, North Germany, northeast of Holland. He asked the Amsterdam Council to settle in the city. He brought with him a very Torah scroll, which is still to this day in possession of the Portuguese Synagogue of Amsterdam. Now, I just want to explain this. We're going to be talking a lot about the Portuguese Synagogue. There were not just Portuguese Jews who were involved in the synagogue. Of course, there were Spanish Jews or other Jews, you know, from Southern Europe or even from the Caribbean. But it was always called the Portuguese Synagogue, and I'm going to explain a little bit more later about it. For many, it was the first time, if you can imagine that they had seen a Torah scroll. They were Marranos, so they could not have a Torah scroll. But still, Jews could only be in certain professions. Portuguese Jews, the pioneers, had already established themselves in trade with other countries in the world, mostly the Western Hemisphere, where they also had relatives. The German Polish Jews were more involved in the street trade, like tailors, watchmakers, and all those type of professions. Okay, we go next. Oh, this is a very interesting story. Take a look at this painting to the right. Now, would you mess with a guy like that? I wouldn't. This is Samuel Palace, and he was painted by Rembrandt. We think this was him. They're not exactly sure, but I think it was him. 1633, 1634. Don Samuel Palace, in 1608, he was a learned man, and he was also a pirate. He came to the city of The Hague as envoy of the King of Morocco. He had an official license to capture Spanish ships. On board his ship, he had a kosher kitchen, believe it or not, and a personal aide helping him with the cooking. So this is the first time in my life I ever heard of a pirate that kept kosher. Okay, next. 1616 we are now. There was a new city ordinance for Jews. Nobody would say anything bad about Christians. No Christians could convert to Judaism. No sexual relations allowed with Christian women. That means all the women. Okay, next. So now 1618, the first two synagogues, they quarreled all the time. Wow, this reminds you of something, right? So the third community was established. Here I can see, what is it on the right hand side? You guys are there, can you get rid of that? Okay, anyway, so
Beth Israel.
Oh, Beth Israel, thank you. So in 1639, these three synagogues merged and became Talmud Torah. They also appointed a board, which was called the Parnasim. They became very powerful because all three rabbis were part of the Parnasim, including the now famous Menasseh ben Israel, who was a printer, as we said, author, linguistics expert, and the vendor of the Jews in word. It was in this synagogue that the Marranos really found their Judaism. And in spite of the fact that they came from different countries, there was social difference, a religious difference, sometimes, of course, deep-seated about Judaism. They all united in this synagogue under the powerful regents, the Parnasim. This is to show you just from that time, early time. This is a Torah shield from 1610, silver, of course. The next one. This is a Chanukiah from 1629. I have one at home here that is very similar to this one, but not as old. My father received it years ago from one of his best Jewish clients in Amsterdam. I've never tried it because obviously you have to use oil, you have to have the little pits. Okay. But still, the Jews were not considered the same citizens. Even the Huguenots, who were the Protestant refugees from France, were considered better than the Jews. Still, many professions were close to them. They could not be members of a guild, which is a trade organization. But exceptions there were in Amsterdam for the Printer Guild, the Real Estate Agents Guild, the Surgeons Guild, and the Apothecary Guild. They did that very well. So, go ahead. Rembrandt. We have to talk, of course, about Rembrandt. And here you see the famous painting on the right, Moses with the two tablets from 1659. Now we know that Rembrandt predominantly used Sephardic Jews to sit in on the paintings. He liked them better. I guess they looked more biblical. I don't know. Also, his house that is still there in Amsterdam, some of you might have visited that. It was only down the street for the famous Portuguese synagogue built later. We're going to talk about that. So it was very close by. Many Sephardic Jews had paintings in their houses from well-known Dutch painters, not just Rembrandt. So Rembrandt made about 160 paintings with biblical subjects, 80 etchings, and more than 600 drawings. Of course, we have to talk. Several of you have asked me in the synagogue already, are you going to talk about Spinoza? Yes, of course. We cannot talk about the Sephardim of Amsterdam in the 17th century and not talk about Baruch Spinoza. I don't want to go into a real lot of detail that, I cannot do it because of time constraints, but the main thing, he rejected the Tanakh, and for those of you who don't know what that is, that's the Hebrew Bible, as the only upper truths, which of course clashed with the principles of the Sephardic community, of which he was a member. His parents belonged to the famous Portuguese synagogue, the Esnog, which is Portuguese for synagogue, and we're going to talk about that later. He visited a Protestant sect in the city of The Hague, and that, of course, when the rabbis found that out, that was taboo. For him, although Holland was mia patria, my fatherland. The ban was issued in 1656, he was excommunicated. After he died in 1677, he was buried in the Protestant church in The Hague because obviously he could not get a proper Jewish burial. Okay, next. This is the house still there on the left in Amsterdam, one of the most famous Portuguese Jews, Issac de Pinto from 1651. You still find a lot of the Pintos in the telephone book in Amsterdam. I did years ago, I did the white pages, and the Pinto or da Costa comes up all the time. So there you see the house on his right. Maybe he was getting ready for a party event. And there's the coach to drop off people. Okay. Another famous Sephardic rabbi in Amsterdam, Chacham Issac Aboab da Fonseca. In 1641, he went to Brazil, where he became the first rabbi in America in the city of Pernambuco. And a Brazilian guy years ago showed me pictures of the city of Pernambuco, and some of the houses look just like Amsterdam, the old houses from the 17th century. Very interesting. A lot of different colors though, but you know, that's the Brazilian style. So because the Dutch lost the sea war with England, they also lost Brazil in 1654, and he had to return back to Amsterdam. And in 1669, he became the chief Sephardic rabbi in Amsterdam, or all of the Netherlands. By the way, the chief Sephardic rabbi of the Synagogue in Amsterdam was also the chief rabbi of all the Sephardim in the Netherlands. And here we come to the famous synagogue, still there. And as I said, in Portuguese, it's called the Esnog. And Chacham Issac Aboab de Fonseca got involved with the construction of the new Portuguese synagogue. Inauguration was in 1675, and you see it on the right-hand side. Unfortunately, we don't see the chandeliers. They probably came later. Oh, there's a few on the left there, yes. But let's go to the next picture. You see more as it is now. Yeah, there they are. So the picture on the right, some of you have told me they've been in the synagogue, and you see the chandeliers. So have to be lit. Those are candles. There never has been in the main sanctuary electric light ever since 1675. And so we go to if there are services, I don't think there are regular services because the community is not big enough, but they do mitzvot. So if you want a only bar mitzvah, I'm sorry, and a Jewish wedding, then you have to, with it comes the Shabbos Goy, and you have to pay it's something like 850 euros extra just for the candle lighting. I saw it once. These are huge ladders, but it takes them about 45 minutes. By the end of the 1880s, I'm jumping a little bit ahead, but it's a very funny story. The board of the Portuguese Synagogue asked for a meeting with the chief rabbi, and they said, Rabbi, the Ashkenazi across the street have electric light in their synagogue. We should do the same. The rabbi did not want to hear it. His comment, we have lived for 5 centuries without electric light. We don't need it now, period. That was the end of the discussion. And there was never any electric, still to this day. Now they have an electric light in the offices, of course, which are around the synagogue. Okay. Some more etchings and paintings from the synagogue. This, of course, is Sukkot. And go to the next one, please. This, of course, is called Idre. You see the members there carrying all the Torah scrolls. And you see clearly the chandeliers are lit. The candles are burning. And the blowing of the shofar. And on the bottom right, for you who can read French, it says Premier jour de l'an, so the first day of the new year, and they're blowing the shofar. Again, the candeliers clearly shown there. Okay. Just a regular Torah service from 1724. Not very different from what we do on Shabbat. they're getting ready to read the Torah, so he's raising the scroll, and then they will read it, and everybody is paying attention, or they're supposed to. One guy to the bottom right there, he looks like he's not interested. But that happens, unfortunately. Okay, by the second half of the 17th century, so we're jumping a little bit ahead now, there were now 180,000 people living in the city of Amsterdam. Among them, 7,500 Jews and 2,500, so 1/3 were Portuguese Jews. Again, when we say Portuguese Jews, they were all the Jews from the Mediterranean. Amsterdam had also become a world-famous center for Hebrew printing. People came from all over Europe to buy books. And one of the first magazine published was the Gazette de Amsterdam for Jews in Spanish by David de Castro Tartas. It went to all countries where Sephardic Jews had contacts, even Spain and Portugal at that time. Okay. Funeral by ship. There's a very interesting etching, and I thought I'd put it in there because if for those of you who have been in Amsterdam, you know it's the streets are very narrow because of the canals. So the Sephardim built a cemetery outside the city of Amsterdam on the river Amstel. The cemetery is still there, and to this day it is used, but you can only be buried there if you can prove you are 100% Sephardic. So, you know, some people got smart and they said, okay, so we have a lot of water in Amsterdam, we're going to do the burials by boat. And that's what you see here. Okay. A wedding from 1720. And here you see the groom is stepping on the glass, breaking the glass. And you see up there to the right, the mother of the bride talking to the bride. And she kind of had a look in her face. Do you know what you're getting into? You know. So anyway, that is again a Jewish wedding. Okay. So now we're going to the 18th century. Unfortunately, the golden age is over and showed a remarkable economic setback. Britain had taken over from the Dutch Republic in becoming the next world power because they had the most powerful navy then. And they learned how to build the ships from us. Every time they captured one of our ships, they just copied it, and then it was a battle we couldn't win because there was a lot more people in Britain than in the Netherlands. In the Golden Age, there was 1.4 million people, and a lot more in England. I don't know exactly the figure, but you can ask Stanley. But there was still a thriving bankers group in Amsterdam, which helped out the new American Republic with many loans. John Adams made several trips to Amsterdam to borrow money, even at one time accompanied by Thomas Jefferson. It was in 1788. And I found the records where he stayed in Amsterdam. The building is still there. All the loans were paid off with interest, so we can say that this little Dutch Republic made a significant contribution to the startup of the United States of America. So now, a little statistic, in 1795, there were 21,000 Jews in Amsterdam, with a total population of 218,000, among them 2,800 Sephardic Jews. This was a very important year for those of you who studied history. This is the year that the French army invaded the Dutch Republic and brought with them the ideals of the French Revolution. That meant that all Jews in the Republic had the same rights as Dutch citizens. There also appeared a shift in the Republic where the patriots supported the French, but the majority of the Jews supported the Dutch royals. Napoleon sent his brother Louis Napoleon to rule as a king. Then came the edict from Napoleon that all Jews needed to get a family name. And that's where we ended up with the name of goldsmiths and etc. Very interesting, several Portuguese Jews became part of Dutch nobility if they could show their old nobility papers. Okay. After Napoleon was out of power in 1815, the Dutch Jews were happy that the Dutch royalty was returning with King Willem I. There he is on the right-hand side. And the country was now called the Royal Kingdom of the Netherlands. We talked about it, and to this day it still is. Okay, until 1842, services were still held in Portuguese, also at the schools. But later on, more Dutch was spoken. So look at this, a bar mitzvah boy. So at the age of 13, he spoke 3 languages. Hebrew, of course, he had to learn Portuguese and Dutch. That's quite remarkable, I think. Okay. I just want to touch on one of the most important Sephardic Jews in the latter part of the 19th century in Amsterdam. Dr. Samuel Sarphati, the big street is named after him. He played an important role in developing Amsterdam into the beautiful city and true metropole. In 1866, he laid the first stone for the famous Amstel Hotel, still in use there, and is now a 5-star hotel. Very expensive. What I understand is now over €1,000 to stay there just in a simple room. But he also was involved in trying to alleviate the shortage, good housing in the city, and at the same time trying to improve the education process for all children, not just Jewish children, all the children in Amsterdam. Okay. So we go to the 20th century now. In 1911, the city of Amsterdam purchased the Rembrandt House in the center of the old city. You see there with the green doors and the green shutters on the right-hand side. It's a museum there. If you go to Amsterdam, please put it on your list, besides the synagogue, of course. Rembrandt worked there from 1639 by 1656. It was officially opened as a museum on June the 10th. In 1911 by Queen Wilhelmina of the Netherlands. On January the 1st, 1860, there were now almost 60,000 Jews in the Netherlands. 3,578 of them, 3,578 were Portuguese Jews. Okay. Another picture how the Dutch royalty had a very good relationship with the Jewish people, especially the Sephardim again. This is the Esnog, the entrance, and this is Queen Wilhelmina and her husband Prince Hendrik in 1904. Okay. I love this painting. Take a look at that. Very famous Dutch Jewish painter, Joseph Israel. And it's a Jewish wedding from 1903. Obviously, it's a Sephardic wedding because only the Sephardim would wear high hats on a wedding like that. Look how we used the light just falling on the, coming down on the couple. And the kind of whatever is in the background is not really important. The groom is putting the ring on to his wife, future wife. Okay. Just want to show you just one other picture. I had so many more, but I thought this was a great picture. Portuguese Orphanage was about 1900. So the Portuguese Synagogue was involved in a lot of do-good work in the whole community. They had their own hospital, their own senior citizen homes. Some of the buildings are still standing there, not too far from the synagogue. And here you see the orphanage and the children, and I guess in the center, the man who heads it all. Okay. I think this is the last picture, but so Prince Juliana later became Queen Juliana and her, Prince Bernard visiting the Portuguese synagogue in 1937. And look at all the people out there. They had just been engaged to get married, so there was big festivities going on in Amsterdam, and of course the synagogue was part of it. Okay. Another very famous rabbi, Chacham Rodriguez Pereira, 1887-1969. So by the last year, you can see he survived World War II. So in 1922, Chacham Rodriguez Pereira succeeded his father as chief rabbi of the Portuguese community in The Hague. He was the first chief rabbi who escaped to England at the start of World War II. He was smart, he got out fast. And after the war, he became the chief rabbi of the Portuguese community in Amsterdam, and thereby the chief Sephardic rabbi of the Netherlands. Okay. We're at World War II. There again is the famous Esnog on the right. 1940, the Portuguese synagogue was not disturbed during the war years. The three Ashkenazi synagogues across the street received substantial damage. I remember as a little boy walking around there in the 1950s, and the Ashkenazi synagogues were always closed. They never reopened. The Portuguese synagogue did, but we still don't know why the Nazis left the Esnog alone. We have no idea. Thank goodness they did. They would not have found anything anyway, because all the Torah scrolls and religious artifacts were hidden in a special secret vault built by the members in the basement. So the Nazis would have never found anything. Okay. In 1941, there are 140,000 Jews in the Netherlands, 4,300 Portuguese. Unfortunately, 110,000 were murdered. That makes the Netherlands as having the highest murder rate of any Western country for Jews. 79% did not come back. For the Sephardim, it was even worse. 93% unfortunately did not return. So the Sephardic community was really decimated by 1945, unfortunately. Okay. Now we are, I think this is the last picture. So this is the first service. You see the Torah scrolls there in the Esnog. The chandelier is still there. May 7, 1945. The first service after the war was held at the Portuguese Synagogue. And of course, the rabbi did the Shechianu. For those who don't know, the Shechianu is a prayer we use for special occasions. And it goes, honored is Baruch Adonai, King of the universe, who kept us alive and maintained us and allowed us to reach this day. Very appropriate, of course, to do the Shechianu. So between those who had returned from the camps and those who had been in hiding and those who came back from other destinations, there were now 35,000 Jews in the Netherlands. I remember what I said in 1940, it was 140,000. It is estimated that there are currently about 53,000 persons in the Netherlands who call themselves Jewish. Okay, was there anything else, Shira? Or that's it? Okay. Before we go to the questions, I don't want to forget, because yesterday was a very important day. Yesterday, 75 years ago, the first edition came out of the diary of Anne Frank. So between the end of the war in 1945, it took a little bit over 2 years for the diary to be published. And to this day, as far as I know, it is still, after the Bible, it's still the most translated book in the world, after the Bible, obviously. So for those who haven't read it yet, there is the newest editions have a lot more information, because obviously, and you can't blame him, Otto Frank had dictated that some of the more personal information that Anne Frank wrote about the family should not be published. But he allowed it to be published in his will. So after he died in 1980, the newer versions show almost everything. I don't think they have left very much out from the original diary. So if you want to buy it, make sure you get the newest version. And now, is there any questions?
I'm going to go ahead and let people unmute themselves if they have a question. I think George Abraham had a comment in the chat, but if you have a question, you can unmute yourself. You can try it that way. Thank you so much, Martin. That was very interesting.
You're welcome.
I have a question. It's Anna Romani. There was a bit of a furor recently about work done by a rather spurious, I think she was a journalist, and she had a private investigator, and they uncovered some, they almost put it out there with, happy to put it out there, but that it was actually a Jewish guy who gave up Anne Frank. Did you read that in the paper?
Oh, it's, okay, that's been completely debunked by now.
Right.
It is a terrible story. Never happened. So there was a commission appointed in 2017, it was, and by August the 4th, 2019, they were supposed to come out with a report, which was the 70th anniversary of the arrest of the people who were in hiding in the annex. There was all kinds of people in this commission. Some of them didn't belong there, had no clue what they were doing. So, and there was the originally there were two retired FBI agents who were experts on cold cases, and one soon disappeared. So it was just one guy, and as he admitted, I don't know if you saw the program in 60 Minutes. This was a real challenge for him. He said, solving cold cases from like 20 years ago is a lot easier than solving cold cases from the war years. And there was a lot of pressure on him to come out with something, because there was a book in the making, there was a filmmaker, and so he started to grab for something that he thought he was a Jewish accountant. He was a CPA, and he was a traitor because he had given names of more Jews to the Gestapo office in Amsterdam. There is no way, absolutely no way, and I talk to people all the time that are experts on the Anne Frank story, most notably David Barnow. He wrote his own books about the whole story, and I met with him in Amsterdam, and I was in touch after the 60 Minutes story, and he completely debunked it. There is no way that this guy knew where the Frank family was hiding. So my theory is, and a lot of people agree with me that more know about this stuff, the answer is very simple, I think. So what happened is there was 8 people in hiding by the end of 1942, and so they needed to have food for 3 meals a day. And the office manager, Miep, who also wrote her own book about the whole story, was very close with Anne, and another office service manager, Beb Voskou. So this was the situation. The stores closed at 6 o'clock in Amsterdam. They finished working at 5. So as soon as they finished working, they had to grab their bikes, and they were large bags, and they would go shopping. Now, here's the thing. There was no supermarkets in those days. So you had to get the meat from the butcher, the bread from the bread baker, the vegetables from the vegetable man, etc., etc. Only the dry goods you would buy, like flour, from a grocery store. So they had to go to all these stores. So they developed a pattern. And I'm convinced that somebody, and it was a woman who betrayed the family. We know that from the guy that was arrested in Vienna in 1963, Simon Wiesenthal. Found him, ratted him out. He was working as a police officer on the Viennese police force, but he was the arresting officer at the annex in 1944, August the 4th. So, and he told the Dutch police commissioner, went out there to interview him, that his boss, the head of Gestapo in Amsterdam, who unfortunately committed suicide in 1944, but this guy had told him it was a female voice that called in. So you put kind of 2 and 2 together, and my theory is that because these women went out, 5 days a week. Most of these stores were closed on the weekend. So they were bicycling over the canals. They were going to all these stores, and people started to question, of course, why these two women buying so much food? And, everybody knew each other. And Miep only had a husband to care for. Her son was not born until after the war. And the other lady also had a husband. So why were they buying all these groceries all the time? So I think that somebody got a hold of that and maybe sat in it for a little while, could even have followed the women. Where are they going? And the women were probably not aware that they were followed to the annex on the Prinsengracht. And that's the story. But no, this whole, it was totally debunked. And the Anne Frank Foundation in Amsterdam, which is the leading voice on everything, has come out with a statement that it is absolutely false, that this guy and his granddaughter has been very upset, obviously, because she never heard the story, of course, and she has been fighting too. She took legal action, and I think it's still in the courts, but she's going to win. She's going to win because, you have to convince, we don't have the jury system in the Netherlands, but you have to convince the prosecutor and the judge that this is what happened, and there is no way.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Can I put my hand up again?
Okay.
I've spent a lot of time in Brazil. I worked there actually, but I know Pernambuco and Recife.
Tudo bom?
Tudo bom.
Okay.
Acho que sim hoje.
Yes.
I've spent a lot of time in Pernambuco, and it's very interesting in the capital city of Recife. The evidence of Jewish life there hundreds of years ago it's very evident. Yes. And I've actually, there's a beautiful synagogue there, and as you know, it's right opposite these old buildings that are pure Dutch. I mean, those tall, yes, narrow with the decoration on the top. The synagogue's beautiful inside. It's purely a tourist. I don't think they do anything there. I don't think they may occasionally have events there. But when you go in, the walls are all raw brick, and people have put messages in the bricks the way they do in Jerusalem at the wall.
Yeah.
And then under the lobby, in the front lobby, which you've probably seen, there's a mikveh. They uncovered a mikveh, and it's got glass. You can stand and look down. And it's a mikveh down under the lobby. I don't know if it was hidden there or they went through a period when it had to be hidden, or I'm not sure about that. I didn't ask. I was in a hurry on my way to the airport and I ran in. But even out in Brazil, when you go out into some of the more, when you go up into the further west, I've come across people with names like Teixeira, which means textile. Yes. And they are from very old Portuguese families.
Yes.
Portuguese Jewish families, and they know it. They call themselves Sephardi. They're not observant in any way, but they know their history, and it's pretty old.
Yeah, and so today most of the Jews live in the big cities, Sao Paulo and Rio de Janeiro. Have very, I don't know how many, but very large.
Yeah, in Sao Paulo, it's huge. Yeah.
Yes, I've heard that. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Very interesting. Anybody else?
I was told by a member of the Brazilian community that actually the so-called synagogue in Recife was not a synagogue, it was actually the house of the Rabbi, because the orientation of the bima doesn't go east. And so it's probably the private house of the Rabbi of Recife. The real synagogue probably was destroyed during the war in the 1600s.
Yes.
But it doesn't matter, it's still historically relevant.
Yes.
But it's not accurate to say, according to this member of the Brazilian Jewish community, that was the synagogue of the community.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. Okay. Anybody else?
I have a question.
Yes, who is this?
How do you account for the consistent increase in the number of Jews in those who you said identify as Jewish in the Netherlands? I mean, you were showing us 20,000, 30,000, 50,000.
Yes. So, yeah, some people, like there's a lot of Israelis in Amsterdam. So in the survey, probably, they define as Jewish. So they were counted in that. But it's a good sign. I mean, 53,000 is a lot better than 30-some thousand in 45. So it has come back. There have in Amsterdam, I know several religious little synagogues have sprung up in the last 20 or so years. So there's a very active Jewish life in Amsterdam. Unfortunately, they have to be careful. Some of them do not even wear the yarmulke on Shabbat because there have been problems. Amsterdam has a fairly large Muslim community now. And I don't want to say anything bad because the original Muslims that came, and they came mostly from Tunisia, Algiers, to work there, just like we have, guest workers here from El Salvador, Nicaragua, Middle America. And it's now the third generation of these people. The first people I remember, they came in the 1960s. They were just hard workers, lived together in their own houses, didn't bother anybody. It's unfortunately that younger generations, they're hoodlums, really. They have caused problems. And but lately, I have not heard anything bad. I mean, years ago, there were problems in the famous soccer stadium from Ajax. Ajax is the famous Dutch soccer club that was founded by Jews in the 1930s. And so we're talking about 10, 15 years ago, they used to chant anti-Semitic songs. And but the Amsterdam police and then also the Dutch government did something about that. And they were barred, they caught them, they were barred from going to soccer games. So it's not easy to have a real religious life in Amsterdam. You got to lay low. But now they have it pretty much under control. I have not heard, nobody has sent me anything from the Netherlands that, there was a bad incident. Let's put it that way. All right, thank you, John. Anybody else? Hello, brother. Long time no see. Okay. So I think Andrea, that's it. Right? Is she there?
Thank you so much, Maartin. Thank you.
Thank
Very
you.
informative.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Thank you. It was really, really very informative. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you, Dad.
You're welcome.
Dankjewel, het was heel interessant.
Thank
you.
you.
Thanks,
Oh,
Martin.
and thank Rebecca for the didn't she put together your PowerPoint?
This time was Shira, the little sister.
Oh, okay. Oh, it was Shira. Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Shira. You did a
Yep.
fabulous job.
Great job, Shira.
Bye,
Trade
Becca.
off.
Okay, bye.
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 Good job, Pops.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you, Shira. Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, bye.
Elf there.